Hello, everyone. My name is John Rakich, and welcome to the 11th Annual Location Managers Guild International Panel on Hollywood Location Scouts here at Comic-Con International. So we are the people who work closely with the directors and production designers to find all the real-world locations in movies, TV shows, and other media. From every mansion to every shack, every skyscraper to every post-apocalyptic street, somebody had to be the first person to go out there and find places. Before we get too far, though, let's start off with a quick sizzle reel showcasing this year's panelists with transitions between our original location scout photos and the final scenes in movies and TV shows that we worked on.
Hello, we mean you no harm.
In here. Multiple shots fired. And there's a tank.
What is that again? Owl there.
People are making apocalypse jokes like there's no tomorrow. Too soon?
No, it's topical.
I wish to acknowledge the companies that sponsored our guild's participation here. Big Bear Lake Film Office assists filmmakers with permitting and location needs while filming at Big Bear Lake in Southern California. The Directors Guild of Canada Ontario District Council is a labor organization with over 3,000 members that includes location managers, production designers, and directors. Inland Empire Film Services assists with city, county, and federal film permits in San Bernardino and Riverside Counties, California. The Menifee Film Office provides one-stop location observing the resources necessary to film in the city of Menifee, California. The Riverside County Film Commission helps film productions to find filming locations and local vendors within the county. And finally, the Temecula County Film Office assists productions with permits and location needs in and around the city of Temecula, California. So all of us here today are members of the Location Managers Guild International. And on our panel today, we have members that come from not just Los Angeles, but Atlanta, as well as from Canada and the United Kingdom. We're going to go down the line with some brief introductions of who we are and how we all got into this line of work. I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I've been working in locations for over 20 years. Started off in locations as a scout, now a manager. Worked on TV shows and movies such as Shadowhunters, American Gods, C, and the upcoming series The Changeling for Apple TV+. I'm also the current president of the Location Managers Guild International. And our panel.
Cool. Hey, everybody. Thank y'all for coming out. My name is Ian, and about 11 years ago, I was just an 18-year-old kid in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I really, really wanted to work in film, but I didn't work in film. In fact, I worked in a restaurant, and somebody that I worked with at the restaurant mentioned that her driveway was being used for some equipment placement for a film that was shooting in Charlotte at that time. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh my God, who are you talking to on that film? And let me get their information. And so she gave me the business card of this guy who was an assistant location manager. And I had no idea what that meant. But I knew that he worked on the movie, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I emailed him and put a lot of thought in this email, sent it over to him, and I never heard back. And so the next day, I emailed him again, and the next day after that, I emailed him again, and that happened for about 4 or 5 days, and then finally I did hear back, and he told me, all right, you gotta stop emailing me, but, he said, but I do actually need some extra hands next week on set. And he said, have you done locations work before? And I told him, absolutely I have. And he was like, well, great, just send me a resume. I was like, oh no. So I typed up a fake resume and I sent it over to him. And I said, here's, the extent of my locations work. And he was like, that's great, come on out, you start on Monday. And I was like, okay, that's perfect. So I'm in, I got my foot in the door, so I'm paying people at the restaurant to cover my shifts while I go, get my start in Hollywood. And, I just kind of put my head down and kept my eyes and ears open for those first few days. And I didn't ask too many questions and just tried to figure out the answers as best I could. And I just gave it 110%. And then at the end of the week, somebody called the location manager, came out, and he said, hey, I hear you've been doing really well. I'd like to know if you want to stay with us for the rest of the show and join us full time. And I said, I would definitely like to do that. And so I called the restaurant that day and I told them, listen, I'm not coming back. I work in film now. And so here we are 11 years later. It's been a really, really cool journey and a very lucky journey in a lot of ways. Recently I've got to work on a handful of really cool projects, like several in the Marvel world. Recently I worked on a movie with Francis Ford Coppola. I worked on several superhero movies. It's been a really, really fantastic and super cool journey, supported by really, really amazing people and amazing teams along the way. So that's my story. I'll pass it down the line.
Ian has just revealed the dirty little secret of location management. You have to be a world-class bullshitter to...
Exactly right.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ilt Jones, and I've been a location manager for 30 years. I've been chased around parks by knife-wielding drug dealers. I've been shot at. I've been escorted off properties by gunpoint. I've been rescued by helicopter off mountaintops. I've been thrown in jail. And none of that was as unnerving as being here today. I hope we can justify our existence on the panel here. As I say, I've been the location manager for 30 years. I'm primarily based in LA, but I've worked all over the world. I've been very lucky that I've got to travel the world on somebody else's dime. But obviously, you can fool some of the people all of the time, and so I've been a lucky recipient of that. I did 90 episodes of The X-Files, done 4 Transformers movies. I did Inception, Dark Knight Rises, and 6 Marvel movies, amongst other things. So it's been a fun ride. So thank you for being here today, and I hope you enjoy yourself.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. My name's Andrea Keener, and like my 2 cohorts and these 2 over here, I've been a location manager now for about 25 years. And I had no idea what I was doing when I started, and I just knew I've tried a couple other things along the way, and I keep coming back because I realized in those 25 years that I really have the best job on the planet. I've worked in television and features, mostly California, now Atlanta, and I've had some amazing experiences and gotten to see and do more than my family can even imagine, right? More than I could ever have imagined, and they still wonder, what do you do? My mom just read a book by Tom Hanks, and she goes, I think I finally understand what you do. I've been telling you, Ma, for 25 years. Thanks for catching on. But I'm so happy to be here and be able to speak to all of you today, and thanks for taking an interest in what we do.
Hi there, good afternoon, and like everybody, thanks very much for coming along. My name's Naomi Liston. I have been in the locations department for about 23 years. I originally hail from a place called Edinburgh in Scotland, and incredible place to grow up in, and I was very fortunate that Edinburgh hosts the Edinburgh International Festival, it hosts the Edinburgh Film Festival, it hosts the Television Festival. So I grew up in a real arts industry, and I worked at the Film Festival, I worked at the Television Festival, I worked at the Arts Festival. I knew that I wanted to be in film and television, and it was just a case of how I was ever going to break into that. And 23 years ago, it was very, very hard in the UK. And not only that, I was a young woman. Believe it or not, back then, it was jobs for the boys and not for the girls. And it took a lot of pushing and kicking doors down to get in there. It's a lot better now, thankfully. So I was lucky enough to do many, many jobs in Scotland, in the UK, abroad, and then I met and fell in love with my husband, who happened to live in Northern Ireland, and I made the move over to Northern Ireland and sidestepped my way into a TV show called Game of Thrones, and that took up 10 years of my life, along with during my breaks I'd go away and work on Marvel films, I'd go and work on other jobs to keep me fresh. So I continue to love my job, love every day I'm working on my job. We're in such the privileged position where no day is the same, every day is a school day, and the locations that we get to see and the places that we get to go and visit and present, it's an absolute joy. So I think we can all say how much we enjoy our job and how privileged we are to be doing the job that we do.
Great. Good afternoon. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. This is great to see such an awesome turnout. My name is Matt Palmer. I'm a location manager, and I work in Calgary and in Vancouver up in Canada. And I got my start many years ago. I had just come out of film school in Montreal at Concordia University, and with ambitions to be a director, and I was working at a hotel in Calgary and at a film festival, and I had given some group had come through our office, and it turned out to be it was a location manager and was touring around a group that was going to shoot a movie there, and I slipped in my resume. Never heard anything for months, and then one day I get this phone call from this guy named Reno Pace, who's a well-known location manager, and says, hey, I'm looking for somebody to come help us in the office tomorrow. And it just happened to be my day off. So I went and worked for the day, and the first thing he did was toss me a package of photos, or a bunch of packages of photos. Here, I'll put these together, and I had no idea what that meant. And back in the old days, we used to shoot on traditional film, and you would shoot panoramic photos, and they would tape them together and paste them in folders. It would take hours to do. So he tossed this stuff to me, and I'm like trying to figure out how to put together someone else's photos from a place I'd never been to. And anyways, just at the end of the day, I said, so do you need me tomorrow? And they said, well, we don't know, maybe give you a couple more days. So I went to work and I said, I won't be back tomorrow ever again. And they offered me a letter of recommendation. I was like, okay. Anyways, I ended up working the whole show, which ended up being Unforgiven, which was an incredible experience to get as a first show, which I didn't know at the time until a year later was winning Best Picture. And then my first job scouting was I was in Vancouver, and I heard there was a show about to start in Calgary, and I called the location manager and said, do you have any work? And he says, well, you can start as a scout on Monday. So I drove back to Calgary, showed up to his house at 7:30 in the morning. He tossed me a script and said, okay, go scout. And I had no idea what that meant or how to do it, and which I think goes to a lot of how we do it in this business, which is fake it till you make it. And that was an incredible experience getting to scout on that show. And since then, I've gone on and I took a 10-year break directing documentary, and my first show back, I went on set to work on Interstellar, which was an incredible experience. And since then, I did the last season of X-Files. I did AMC series, second season called The Terror, Stephen King's The Stand, the last 2 episodes of The Last of Us, and I just finished doing an incredible movie will be coming out hopefully next year with Jude Law and Nicholas Hoult called The Order.
So, Andrea, can you please give everyone here a quick summary of what it is that we actually do? What is the location scouting process, and what do we do during the stages of a typical production?
He gave me the easy question, clearly. Well, so somebody has an idea, they write a script. We get a call from a producer, and we think, oh, thank God, I will work again. I've got my next job, or at least for now. And I'm going to read that script, and we break it down and break out all the locations on it. Might have an idea of what's going to be a stage build or what we're going to have to actually go find in the real world. And that's the fun part. That's where we start with our research about where you're actually going to be. Is it going to be in Atlanta? Is it going to be in Ireland? Is it going to be in Calgary? Wherever it is, where are you going to start looking for that house or that crazy road or that cave or whatever. So you start your research, and then you get out there and you start taking photos. And that's the fun for me. It's like exploring. I love just turning down a new street and seeing something that nobody else might have seen. And you think, oh, that could really work. Or sometimes, and this is fun, what I used to do in television, and I don't know if anybody else who's worked in like some of the old network series when we would do 24 episodes of, X-Files, or in my case, Scandal or Cold Case. You have, like, the writer's written something, and you can't find it where they want it to be, because we also have a schedule and a budget. And so I might say, we don't have this particular staircase, but I've got this amazing doorway. What if I see something that's really interesting and artistic, and it's got some good, the people love to use the word texture, right? Yeah. And I will present that. And that's often something you have to be very careful with, because they don't necessarily want to rewrite the script. But this is their idea and it's precious. But we get to have a lot of creative input into what it's going to look like. You saw in the sizzle reel, like, there's a neighborhood that was built in probably the 90s, and Ian saw it, scouted, this is where we're going to land an alien spaceship. And it's going to be amazing, and we're going to knock out this little 4-year-old girl with a baseball or a basketball. And so, a lot of times I'll read the script 3 times before I even go out there. I'm going to read it for the story so I get the feel of what the story's about. Is it moody? Is it dark? Is it funny? And then I'm going to read it a second time for the action that takes place in each of those, locations. Because am I blowing up a house? That's going to be a little bit different scout, Where am I going to actually find that? Do I look for something that may be run down? Do I talk to the production designer? Is that something that we're going to build? Do I find a big empty lot? Do we have the budget to build a facade of a house, a shell? We just did that on a project that'll be coming out in October. We built a couple of 3-story farmhouses in the middle of Oklahoma on a project. And so then I'll read it again and say, okay, well, what is the camera angle doing here? And sometimes, a lot of times, I want to scout based on the camera angle, right? If it's 2 people having dinner at a Waffle House, we have those in Atlanta. I don't think we have them too much here in San Diego. But where's the conversation taking place? I'm going to take maybe a low shot, right, of the table. I'm not just going to. Thank you.
Speak up, damn it.
Dang it. Can y'all hear me in the back now? Sorry. So I want to take the photos of the location to really tell the story that I've read already. Right? I don't want to just go in there and take a photo here, take a photo there. What's going to tell the story? And sometimes you'll see something really cool, and you slip that picture into the, into the file as well, just to give a little bit piece of interest. Sometimes the designers and the directors dig that, or they might use it for, in the movie. We want a hinge just like that one that you saw. So, and then once we get the director there and we sell the location, you can do all of this here, then we get into the fun part, the other fun part that works the other side of our brain, the logistics, right? We have to bring the circus to the location. How do I maintain that amazing stone hotel that y'all had in Calgary, right? How do we get the project to film, get it to the screen, and then maintain it so that somebody can live back in that house at the end of it, right? We have to put it back, and we have to, so often what I know I do, and I know my colleagues do as well, we need to make sure that the next person can go film in that neighborhood too. So we don't want to abuse the location. We need to have integrity and honesty with what we're telling the properties and the permit offices that we're going to be doing. Yes, I am going to blow up your house, Are you cool with that? We'll put it back, we promise, And sometimes we make a change, make an alteration to a property, and they love it. So that works out sometimes. Not the blowing up part. They don't usually like that. So, from the soup to nuts, we get to have that creative input, and then we get to do the managerial. We have a team that works for us. We have a budget that we have to stay within most of the times, all the time. And so it's the research and the exploration that thrills me as a scout. So we get to see so many cool things.
So following along on what Andrea said, a very wise location manager in Pittsburgh, Kent Jackson, said that location managing is the only job where you start with a camera and finish with a toilet brush. But it's also the most fun you can have with your clothes on.
Well, Ilse, so in your career, you've worked on some pretty high-profile, large-scale franchise movies. You've also, as you mentioned, gotten to work internationally. What are some of the additional challenges in movies that are so much bigger in scope and scale?
Obviously, you're presiding over a much larger budget with all of the responsibility that implies. But the main thing, as I know Ian knows, is that the scale and the ambition that comes from that, this ambition that's buried in the script, and also the director as well. They lick their lips for that, the prospect of doing big stuff. For example, if you put up that bridge, has anybody seen Inception? Right, there was that scene with the van going off. Well, Chris Nolan, the director, wanted to. When I showed him the bridge, I wanted to do it so that the van went off at the ground level, but he wanted to have the bridge in the up position, which the bridge is not equipped to do. The bridge has gone now, but the bridge was not equipped to do. So basically, we had to go to Caltrans, the California Department of Transportation, and arrange to take the bridge apart because we had to have vans and equipment and crew And of course, the bridge is not supposed to have anything on it when it goes up into the up position for a ship to pass underneath. So we had to negotiate with Caltrans to take 25,000 pounds of weight off the bridge, handrails and signs and all sorts of things. And that sort of back and forth with the engineering and the permitting, you just don't have room or time to do that on smaller project budgets. And then if you go on to the Chicago, on Transformers 3, we basically shut down the center of Chicago, and we had, for 2 weekends, we spent $1.8 million to shut down the Michigan Avenue Bridge, which is the bridge at the bottom of the screen. And we basically had to do things like, there are boat tours that take place on the left side of the river there. We had to take the boat, the places where you bought the ticket agencies and the ticket booths, and move them to the north side of the river on the right side. So basically we had to take their booths apart, take them to the other side of the river, arrange for electricity and internet and all sorts of things like that. And you just can't do that sort of thing on lower budget movies. That took months, probably 6 months to put together. And then if you go on to the next picture, this is the Sham Shui Po district in Hong Kong, where we did a car chase on Transformers 4. We did 1,100 separate deals with the merchants there, basically, because we shut down the streets you can't just have one block. We had probably about 10 blocks. So we went block by block. And of course because it was Hong Kong and there's a lot of people and market traders, it was all in cash. It was terrifying from an accounting standpoint. The accounting department had to swallow a lot of their pride and rules and regulations, but we got it done. But 1,100 different deals, so that took months as well. So you just can't do that sort of stuff on smaller budget projects. Another of the challenges that everybody knows, that you're a big. I know Ian had to go through this in Atlanta. If you are on a big budget show, the people you're dealing with to rent parking lots and so on and so forth, they know you're a big show, so they ask for big money. And if you try and hide behind a code name, which is often the case with these movies, as soon as they find out you're a big budget movie, it's a quick way to be told to F off. But you get plenty of practice trying to persuade them to do business with you at a reasonable rate. But the thing is, you have to make sure that as a big budget movie, you don't ruin it for small budget movies that come behind you. It's very difficult if you're shutting down a street and you're buying out all the businesses because you're going to blow shit up in front of their business. It could be that the next production that comes along is a small production that doesn't want to blow anything up, doesn't want to shut the street down, they just want to do a walk and talk on the sidewalk. But of course the merchants, having just dealt with the larger budget, have got sort of dollar signs in their eyes. So I know Ian feels the same way. You've got to be very careful not to screw it up for the budget, for the smaller budget movies that come afterwards. As regards working internationally, the language barrier and local customs can be challenging. I always employ a local location manager, and it's important to me that they translate exactly what you say, because quite often they'll interpret what you're saying, which is exactly not what you want, because I want them to tell them exactly what I said, whereas if they interpret into the local customs, there'll be lots of messing around with sort of building a rapport and taking things slowly, because in America you tend to go wham bam, you do the deal quickly, whereas, for example, I worked in Prague and it takes about half an hour to talk to a farmer about parking in his field. It's a major exercise in learning patience. Basically, it's all about going local. If you're working internationally, you can't just go, the cavalry's here, you've got to go in and remember that you're a guest in that country, because it's a quick way to get the backs ups of the locals. So lots of different things to be borne in mind.
Okay, so Matt, it's kind of the opposite for both of us. We both work out of Canada, and a lot of our projects take place in other cities around the world, but they've come to our jurisdictions for logistical reasons or tax credit reasons to shoot there. So what's your experience with that, and how are your methods of finding locations to cheat other cities around the world?
Well, that's always really interesting when you first read the script, and I've been really fortunate the last few years, worked on some really interesting, a lot of period shows actually, which is even more challenging. So the first thing is, once you read the script and break it down into what all the individual scenes and locations are and trying to figure out, what's the story and what's happening, is then starting to do some research on the particular areas that you're going into, what's the architecture, what existed in those places at that time. So and then figuring out, if you know the area well where you're working, is trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to start looking? So usually it's the research at the start, going through location files, whether it's with the film commission online. And then it's either myself and or my scouts going out, and we'll start to just scour the areas. I'll pinpoint certain areas where I think we want to find things. One of the most challenging ones I worked on in the last couple of years was an Apple series called Pachinko, which took place in Korea and Japan and a little bit in New York City. And trying to do that in Vancouver is a story that takes place between 1910 and 1989 as well. So we span multiple time periods in that time frame. So we were trying to figure out between what was going to shoot in Vancouver, what was going to shoot in Korea. And then once they figured that out, once I knew what the Vancouver portion was really trying to figure out within the few options that we had, what I could show, what was going to work. And then it's the same in Calgary. We tend to get a lot of shows that are looking for mountains, looking for prairies, looking for landscape. And for period shows, it's always the biggest challenge is trying to give as much scale and visual expanse as you can to a director, so that they're not narrowed into, well, you can only shoot this one direction, because if you look across the street, there's a modern skyscraper or a modern house. So you're trying to just, give as many options as possible. Is usually the first thing. Is you don't want to just show a director or production designer one thing. You want to try to be able to show them, multiple options for things, because oftentimes they're trying to figure out what's the visual look of the show. And how is it all going to fit together? Because it all has to, at the end of the day, visually it all has to work together so that you feel and you're absorbing the audience in the experience of that time frame, that time period, and that story. And so if you've got, one or two locations that kind of pop up and don't fit together, it can takes you out of the story. And so that's often you're trying to figure out between what the real location has and what you can bring in terms of production design and art direction and what's possible on that scale. So for example, on The Last of Us, in the last episode, we were looking for a couple things that were, pretty challenging. One was the freeway sequence where Joel and Ellie are sitting at the side of the road. They've just come through a harrowing experience in episode 8, and we needed a big freeway that is like Salt Lake City to be able to shut down, and not just shut it down for a day, but it had to be shut down for multiple days, because you've got to come in, you've got to dress everything around it with, you've got to age it with dirt and vines and dead leaves and all the kind of stuff, the overgrowth that happens in the Last of Us world. And we looked at a number of different options, including, I was trying to get them to let us shut down a major freeway in Calgary. So what if we did it, like from Saturday night at, 7 o'clock at night, we'll shut it down, we'll dress, and we'll shoot first thing in the morning, like 5 a.m., and we'll shoot for as long as you'll let us. And I couldn't get them to, for some reason, shut down a major freeway. I'm not sure why that was. But anyways, we got some suggestions from the city, and we went and looked at them, and finally we came across this one area that was underneath a major freeway. So it had a bit of the scale. It still didn't have quite the scale of a major freeway in Salt Lake City, but it was pretty good. We got about 6-7 lanes, and they let us shut it down. They let us shut that down completely. One side of it we got for 5 days to dress it, and then the second portion we had for like a day and a half. So we had a complete closure. So that was really challenging, just to come up with, the elements there that would work for Salt Lake City, and then knowing that, you go and you spend now, these days, you spend a lot of time also going with not just the director and the production designer, but also the visual effects supervisors, because then they'll come in and say, okay, well, we've got cut lines on the bridge, we've got, you know, areas here we can dress, and we can age certain things that you can't just physically deal with. Like we had on the one side of the road, we had a brand new white, shiny cheese factory, and there was no way, A, because it's a food facility, but B, just because the expense to be able to age that was going to be an onerous task. So visual effects guys were quickly able to come in and say, no, we can deal with that much easier in visual effects. So these days you're dealing with trying to straddle what's it going to cost between doing it practically on location to do all the aging, to do all the set dressing, and what can visual effects take over that will be more cost effective, and then balancing those two out. Because one thing that the visual effects can really help with these days is it can actually help to cut down a bit of time on the location, because you're not having to dress the same expense. You can deal with things in the background or even in foreground with visual effects that make our job a little bit easier, and help with the impact of the location, which is at the end of the day, I think what all of us are trying to work towards is how can we go in, create a lot of impact in many ways, but to keep that impact as light as possible. And when you leave, I always tell people, like, at the end of the day, I want to be able to look you in the eye, shake your hand, and hopefully everybody will say it was a good experience. So that's, I think, the biggest balancing act that we're always making, whether it's a big car chase or explosions or shooting off a machine gun in a ritzy neighborhood at 4 in the morning, which I just did. And to be able to do it without having people be upset, complain, and do all those things. So.
Okay. So Ian, you and Andrea are both based out of Atlanta. And for anyone here that's not based out of the traditional LA, New York production centers, do you have any recommendations on how they could actually get into this crazy circus-like lifestyle that we're in?
Create a fake resume and send it out there. No, I think, the industry is so unique in that, there's not really, a corporate ladder to climb, or like a well-defined, easy way in, or even a standard or normal way into the industry. As you saw as we were all talking, like, everybody's got their own story and their own little path that they carved into the business. And so I think if you're, not in, LA or New York, where it might be a little bit more common or a little bit more accessible, I think it really just comes down to persistence and creativity and tenacity, and using, the resources and connections you have and building on those to get in front of the right people. The industry is entirely a people industry, and getting into it is exclusively dependent on who you know and who you're connected to. And now with the internet, there's so many resources as far as, job postings and, films that are coming to your town. Websites like IMDb will take, all of the projects that are filming, and they'll list all the people who are working on those projects. So if there's a department that you're interested in and you hear that a movie is filming in your town, you might even be able to look up that project on IMDb and say, okay, I need to find an email address for so-and-so. Let me get my name in front of them. A lot of places that are interested in film, have film academies, or they have, like school programs or something like that sort of prepare you for a career in the industry. And oftentimes through those programs, you can get a resume out to people who are actually working on projects. So, there's never a real easy way to get in, but there definitely is a way to get in. And with a little bit of persistence and a little bit of tenacity and some creativity, and combining that with the internet and sort of the local resources in your area, there's always a way to get in front of the right people. And then I would follow that up by saying that once you do identify who the people are that you want to be in front of and that you want to connect to, don't give up, and email them and continue to email them and just say, hey, I'm checking back in. I'm still interested in getting in. I still want to work in your department, and I would love to meet you for coffee. And you might not get a reply immediately. And a lot of the times, folks are busy, especially when they're working on a project, and the amount of emails that we get coming in are just extraordinary sometimes. But it all comes down to being in the right place with the right person at the right time. And all it takes, speaking from my own experience, is to just you happen to send an email at the time that they're like, oh, you know what, actually I do need somebody to help pick up trash or, clean the bathroom or, carry this equipment or whatever next week. Man, all my usual people are, that I usually hire are busy. Well, let's give this person a try. Let's meet them and see what they're like. And that's your foot in the door. So I would say once you find those people, just don't give up and 100% keep pushing and keep emailing, keep at it. And once you get that foot in the door, take it and run with it. Keep your eyes, your ears open, ask the questions that you need to, and push for it, absolutely.
So as you can tell, all of us have plenty of stories, and we could literally be sitting here for the next couple hours, but we're quickly running out of time. So while everyone's here, if anyone's got a quick favorite story from one of the shows you've worked on, and Naomi, I'm sure with Game of Thrones on your resume, you've probably got more than one.
Yeah, plenty of stories. Certainly with Game of Thrones, we had a multitude of really substantial action sequences over the years, and one of certainly one of my favourite ones was Bob, otherwise known as Battle of the Bastards, in season 6, which was probably one of my most challenging logistically. We shot this on a estate in the middle, sort of just outside Belfast, where we actually had the Godswood tree as well. We were shooting with multiple units. We had a stunt unit, a horse unit. We would come off the we'd be shooting on the battlefield one day, we'd come off the battlefield the next day, shoot an action sequence at the Godswood, where, it all ended at the end of season 8. But we'd be shooting there, we'd have a green screen unit. Logistically, it was probably one of my toughest moments in my career of how we were, how I was going to attack it, and B, how we were all going to survive it on this estate, which only had single track country roads with over 750 extras on a daily basis, 60 stunts on a daily basis, over 100 horses on a daily basis, a crew of 500. It's my responsibility to ensure that we have the correct flow around site and that everybody's ready at the right time and everything's being facilitated, and nothing's coming to a grinding, sticky halt. And so we'd gone through all the prep and everything, and I'd worked out, okay, great, over the brow where the battlefield is, over the brow of the hill over there, that's where I'll put the holding marquee for all the extras. I'll put the horse base up, all the temporary stables went up there, the marquee for all the saddles, for all the horse feed, the marquee for all the stunts to rehearse, the marquee for all the action vehicles, the armory marquee. I had to get the water mains put in, all the toilets, everything. I was like, great, I can keep all of that chutney up there. It never has to come near where all the crew and the technical vehicles and all of that flow. Brilliant, I'm going to make this work. And then we're on the recce, and, we've gone through how the battle was going to happen, and in this part, the Boltons were going to be up on that hill, and I checked again. Great, we will never see all those marquees. We will never see it. Great. And we're, another recce. And Miguel, Shatcock, he was directing this episode, and then he starts walking. And then he kept walking. And I'm like, Mick, what are you doing? Where are you walking to? Why are you walking over there? And he just kept on walking. He goes, yeah, Gnomes, I think this might be quite, yeah. And I was like, oh my God. If he walks any further and clocks round any further, we are going to see that whole setup. And that's going to be it. I'm going to be walking away from this job because I have no other way of servicing this at all. And I'm nearly running after him, nearly rugby tackling him to the ground. He's going to stop. Anyway, thankfully, he did stop in time. And yeah, that was a real squeaky bottom moment for me. Good fun, though.
I'm sure we can all say, never let a director walk off leash.
Ilt, I think you've got one.
Yeah, easily my favorite moment in my entire career. I was working on Kong Skull Island, and we were scouting mangrove swamps on a river delta in Thailand. And we were chugging slowly in our boat through the swamp. And the director said, I think I'd like to get out and walk around. And I said, hang on, it's a swamp, the clue's in the name. He said, nonsense. He says, pull the boat over there. There's a sandbar. That'll hold my weight perfectly. So we very sort of doubtfully manoeuvre the boat over to the sandbar. And he proudly stands up on the edge of the boat, steps forward and disappears up to his waist in mud. And we couldn't do anything for about 20 minutes, half an hour, because we were screaming with laughter. We were like a bunch of little school children peeing our pants laughing. The producer was literally rolling around on the floor of the boat, holding his sides. And so we tried to do a fireman's chain to pull him out. And every time we started to pull him, the mud went, and we'd start to laugh again. So we'd have another 10 minutes delay. Literally took 7 of us to pull him out, and I think we had about a 4-hour car journey after that, and he was sitting covered in mud for the rest of the car journey. But whenever I think about that, it literally makes me laugh again. So it's my favourite moment.
Okay. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I'm getting the high sign from the organizers here. So I want to thank the panel for being able to come be part of this event. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you all for coming out, being part of the 11th Annual Hollywood Location Scouts panel.